To everybody. Yes, thank you for the reminder. The meeting is being recorded, so I hope you're all happy with that. So welcome back to this session. And while we're waiting for everybody to come back from the breakout rooms into this room, let me briefly introduce segment 4, Winning Together, Fostering Radical Collaboration. And we will have a new moderator for this, and that's Claire O'Neill, the Managing Director from the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. Thank you for being with us, Claire, and I hand over to you.
Thank you, Martina. I'm just waiting for someone to release my screen. Okay, there we go. The power of the wonder of Zoom. Thank you so much, and welcome to everybody. It's great to be involved in this really important whole process, this incredible race to dialogue process as a race to zero dialogue, but also to speak very specifically about the built environment and to try and bring together some of the threads that have been explored earlier today and look at this as a system, but not a system that is theoretical and on paper, but a system of radical collaboration. How do we pull all of these pieces together from the local politicians, the national politicians, the providers of finance, those who are campaigning for sustainable infrastructure? How do we actually make this shift together? You're not here to listen to me, you're here to listen to our extraordinary speakers. I'm just going to run through very quickly who we've got the pleasure of listening to today, and then we're going to turn over to a man who many of you will know, Bertrand Piccard, to help us think a little about making this concept of radical collaboration important. So we're going to be hearing in a moment from Magali Anderson, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at LafargeHolcim, obviously an enormously important player in the provision of low carbon building materials, and a company that it is, in a hard to abate sector, as we like to say, but is setting extraordinary targets and delivering on them. Elizabeth Chege is joining us from the Kenyan Green Building Society. She's also an entrepreneur and is going to be talking to us about some of these questions about how you lend into this space. And Lena Hock, who is the SVP for Sustainability from Skanska, again, needs no introduction in terms of a major project development and construction group, and really focusing now on delivering these climate neutral constructions and looking very much at innovation and partnership. Can I just also welcome 3 women, very senior women in a sector that is not necessarily thought of as having, as being blokes in hard hats. So I think a proof that diversity is developing fast as we think about some more of these holistic solutions. We're then going to hear from Seth Schultz, who is the Executive Director at Resilient Shift, an organization that you will know who is really focused on helping the engineering community delivering a carbon neutral and resilient infrastructure. And we're delighted that we've got the mayor of Mendoza in Argentina, Mayor Suarez, who is a lawyer, who is now the mayor of Mendoza for a year, who's going to be joining us in a little bit. There he is. Hello, Mr. Mayor, who is going to talk to us about this interface of national and local politics, so incredibly important. And by the way, when Mayor Suarez speaks, you will be able to use the interpretation button at the bottom of your screens for simultaneous Spanish to English translation. And finally, we're going to hear from Katarina Drajovic. I hope that's not too much of a terrible attempt to pronounce your last name, Katarina, who is the head of the environmental management unit at Banco Procredit in Ecuador, who is an expert in sustainable finance and is implementing the IFC EDGE certificates currently. So we're going to hear a lot from this extraordinary rich panel of participants today. And all I'm going to say is both from the WBCSD perspective, but as the former Minister for Energy and Clean Growth in the United Kingdom government, the government that's passed the first net zero legislation for industrialized economies. And you'll have seen today the Prime Minister Johnson's come out with a set of ambitious 10-point plans. I guess my time in politics showed me that you can make pledges, you can set targets, but often the thing that delivers the result is the rather detailed and sometimes quite unsexy conversations about this system collaboration. How do you build trust? How do you build shared targets? And how do you build an ecosystem that wants to work together? And I think for the built environment, that is particularly important. And just it goes without saying, and it was also very clear in the setup videos we had today, that, you know, we have got to crack this built environment problem. We now have about 36% of final energy use and 40% of energy and process related CO2 emissions globally coming out of the built environment. And we are going to have to, by hook or by crook, solve this problem. We do at WBCSD. If we've got members in the audience, great to keep working with you. We have the Building System Carbon Framework that sets out this system collaboration. And we are very keen to keep working with our members and our partners on this systems transformation going forward. But Bertrand, it's a pleasure. You won't remember, but we've been on a couple of panels together now, and it's always an absolute pleasure to listen to you, to do some literally blue sky presentations, given the beautiful picture of your plane behind you. But help us understand how we have to work together to achieve this vision going forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Claire. And of course, I remember each time we went on panels together. And last time it was at this dinner of the World Business Council for Sustainable Development in Madrid. So yeah, we've done things together. And hello to the other panelists and to everyone who's watching this panel. I love this topic about collaboration because it is exactly the opposite from what everything has been done in the last 50 years. At the beginning of the ecologist movement, the polluters were pointed out and fought against. So there were the good ones and the bad ones. Of course, it does not work. Because even if you speak about the bad ones, everybody is consuming their products. So if you speak about oil companies, the oil companies are not the ones who are polluting. It is us who are polluting because we're using their products. So it makes absolutely no sense to make a cleavage. It makes no sense to fight against each other. And today, I think we are in a completely other mindset. But nevertheless, you still have a lot of people who are fighting against others instead of helping them to diversify, helping them to be more efficient. So what is the trigger? I think the trigger today is the fact that the technologies have evolved so much that there are new business markets to conquer, there are savings to be done, there is more efficiency going through new type of technologies to be implemented. So I give you a couple of examples that I like very much. Schlumberger, who is specialized in drilling for oil, who makes a spin-off to drill for heat in the cities in order to install geothermia for heat pumps with special skills of drilling. Fantastic. You have another example, Lafarge-Holcim, who was supported in Switzerland by the WWF to reduce CO2 emissions. They managed to reduce 10% of CO2 emissions several years ago. But what happened? The WWF at the national level was making the collaboration with Holcim, but the local divisions of WWF in the cantons of Switzerland were against it because they said, you are selling your spirits to the devil, which is really the two tendencies that we have today. So what will help the world today? Will it be to fight against people and have, for example, the oil industry collapsing with millions of people unemployed, with a financial crash, which will make a lot of people suffer? Or is it better for the world to make an alliance, a collaboration, to help for diversification, to help to be more efficient, to pull all at the same rope? It's a new type of spirit. It is not what has been done in the past, but I deeply believe that this will reach a lot of result. And when we see today the way that the Business Council for Sustainable Development is bringing this topic, I think there is hope, but there is hope at the moment that we understand that there is a lot of goodwill from a lot of big companies to become cleaner. Now, it is true that although it is possible to be cleaner, it's possible to diversify, you still have some companies, some individuals, some countries, some sectors who are resisting. They resist to make the system last as long as they can. And this is a big handicap. And against these people, we need regulations to oblige them to change. But I think the spirit that we have to keep in mind is the fact that we have to create a lot of winners and as little number of losers as possible, otherwise the system will not move forward. So let's make winners, let's collaborate to help everyone to become a winner. And the one who don't want to collaborate, then we have to push them in order to change the situation worldwide. So these are the few words to introduce the panel, Claire.
Bertrand, I mean, thank you. I know I've heard you speak before, but the message somehow seemed to be even more important today. I loved what you said about this sense of trying to divide and apportion blame rather than actually speaking to work out how we solve problems. And your example for La Fragile Cime and the sort of you're in the pockets of the devil conversation. Of course, we have passionate people who really want to radically change the system, and that's incredibly important. It forces us to pay attention. But there's a very famous English phrase: it's better to jaw than war. I don't know how well that translates globally. It's always better to speak than to fight. And this opportunity to find new ways of collaborating, I think is very, very paramount. So thank you so much for really some very inspiring points and some great examples. If I may, I'd very much like now to turn to some of the ladies and gentlemen who are actually working with organizations to make these changes. I'm going to start, if I may, with Magali, forgive me, and then move on to Lena with the question, what do you need to do to collaborate? Is it a mind shift in the boardroom? Is it simply using your contacts? Is it working with organizations like WBCSD? What actually creates that collaborative spirit going forward? And we'll actually put this question to all of our panelists today. But Magali, could you help us understand that to start with, please?
Sure, thank you, Claire, and good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm very happy to be here today. So, Claire mentioned earlier, breaks a built environment. So before I talk about collaboration, I will spend 2 minutes just talking about the net zero pledge we signed, because it's so exciting to say we need to collaborate, but we also, each of us need to do our part. So we've signed the pledge, which was a good start, but the most thing about it was the fact that we did it with our validated, with our intermediate values, validated by SBTi for 2030. And, collaboration is externally, but it's also internally. So we just announced yesterday, so the conference is so timely. The first sustainability linked bond for 850 million based on that 2030 sustainability target. So meaning, if we don't get there, we will be fine. Now we will pay extra money for the bond. So I think collaboration internally is super important. Sustainability cannot be someone doing a job on the side and not the rest. But then, and I need to answer Bertrand. Thank you, Bertrand, for mentioning La Fragile Cime, and I completely concur with you. I would just say, I hope things are improving. Actually, a lady joined my team very recently from WWF, and really, she joined us saying, I want to make an impact. And I know working with a company like yours will actually make a great impact. So hopefully the collaboration will now go much better than in the future. Because for me, you talk about winners and losers. We need to all be winners, and it's not a competition. I don't consider that I'm competing against my normal competitor, if I can call them that way. It's something we all need, the entire industry, to all move together. And for that, we need a paradigm change on the way we collaborate, because again, there is no silver bullet. There is no zero carbon in the construction sector. It has to be entirely interactive, and it has to be interactive between the start of the process, the design, the way we get the raw materials, the way we build, after the way we maintain the buildings, and then of course the demolitions, which goes back to our concrete. And that's why I'm always very happy. It's not the first time we meet on a panel with Lena, and I'm always very happy to be in a panel with Skanska, because I think they are clearly leading on that field, and us working together is the way we will make it. So in our side, part of the what do, we have also launched a bunch of green products. We have launched the first global green range of concrete. And that's again to help Lena and people like her how to decarbonize the way she built her own with her own commitment. But we really, at the end, it's all about engaging and co-construct around the entire value chain with the public authorities, the architects, etc., etc. And I think I just would like to mention one enabler that I think is important, and we've been working on it in WBCSD, but I think we can move really further on that, is having science-based target ecosystem for the entire built environment. And I'm a true believer in science-based target. I think everything we do has to be measured, had to be scientifically validated, and I'm sure Bertrand would absolutely approve that. And if we don't, we have to do it that way. So I think we need to find a way to mix the scope 3 of Lena and my scope 1 into a big science-based target ecosystem that would look at the full built environment.
Thank you very much, Lena. Over to you. This question of, we talk about the value chain. It sometimes feels very theoretical, but you are a joined up example of a value chain. Tell us how you kind of seek out those collaborations and how you make them work.
Yes. Thank you, and I'm delighted to be here in such a highly engaged and knowledgeable panel. And when Skanska set out our climate target to reach net zero by 2045, we acknowledge that we need to work quite intensely with our value chain, because otherwise we can't do this achievement. And we also need to look through everything when it comes from production materials, energy, transport, construction processes, etc. And that not just driving the technical solutions here. Of course, those are very much needed, and to drive the innovation, the sustainability innovation. And we actually have a name for that within Skanska. We call it Sustain-Innovation, in order for us to have a clear message to our leaders and workers out on site what we want to achieve. Because our kind of work is quite decentralized, and you have different kinds of solutions at different kinds of work sites and different projects. And for all of those, they need to be inspired and understand our overall target and reach out to their different parts of the value chain and to make the effort how to decrease on carbon. Having that mentioned, I would say when it comes to radical collaboration, as for me, all of a sudden, things are happening that we didn't see happen just 5 or 10 years ago, such as Skanska working together with experts within artificial intelligence in order for how we can reduce carbon by better understanding of the flows of materials as well as heavy machinery and trucks. For us to also work closely together with those that are working with transport to truly understand how we are integrating our way of working, as well as also if we are going to measure the value chain's impact and emissions, we need to be able to collect it somehow. So us working together with Microsoft on an open source tool that we call Embodied Construction Carbon Calculator, EC3. It's an open source tool. It has about 10,000 different materials tracked when it comes to their carbon emissions, because we need to have those kinds of collaborations in order to have the same kind of measurements of what counts. But also when we look into this shift, we need to see happen and how we're being a part of it. Not just the technical advancements, even those are so important. Of course, also the policy and regulational ones, as well as to remind ourselves that the public clients is quite a large impact in our sector. They have quite a high amount of public procurement. If they have sustainable requirements, they will help to shift our industry as well. So I like the way you're putting it, Magali, regarding the ecosystem, because we have to think about the clients, the policymakers, as well as for finance. So the shift that is also happening within finance, going towards green bonds and evaluating sustainability performance, I think that is also part of these radical collaborations.
Thank you very much, Lena. I'm just before we come to Elizabeth, Bertrand has to leave us. I would love him to have stayed for longer, but it's been such a pleasure. But Bertrand, there's a fantastic question that's come in the chat, or the question and answer session, which is, basically we love the idea of change, but we are under the gun in terms of timing now. And so it's not just a sort of a nice change to have, it's a combination of a change and a countdown. And the proposal is that we have an organized collaboration. What would be your response to that point?
We heard some very powerful words. Integration. It's not a competition. We need to reach the target all together. These are strong words. And you know what? When it comes from the green parties, it will touch only the green activists. But when it comes from leaders of big corporations, it can touch the entire world. And this is important. In terms of communication, the big corporations have to show the example and communicate much more about the fact that it is possible. I signed a tribune in the Financial Times with 12 of our big partners at the Solar Impulse Foundation. They were the CEOs of Nestlé, LVMH, BNP Paribas, Air France, really big companies. And they were all asking officially the governments to take much more ambitious environmental targets in order to push everybody in the good direction, to stimulate the search for new innovative technologies. And this is important because this is heard by everybody. This is heard by the politicians. And one of the big problems today is that the regulation allows everybody to be very laid back, to pollute, to put as much CO2 as we want in the atmosphere. It's allowed. So many companies say, what we do is legal, so why should we change? So the big companies who want to change have to show it, have to make success stories. They have to ask to be more ambitious in terms of targets. And this is the most powerful message that the world can hear.
Thank you. And again, you put this so incredibly well. I particularly love the point about not just speaking to ourselves, but trying to speak across these boundaries and speak to each other. So thank you, Bertrand, so much for your insights and wisdom. It's always a pleasure to be co-paneled with you. See you again soon. Elizabeth,
I'm really sorry to have to leave. I would have
no, please.
To stay longer.
Thank you for your time. Elizabeth, you have a long and venerable history, if I might say, in this question of how we build more sustainably. And we'd love to get some of your thoughts, particularly given the area of the world that you work in, as to, again, how do we make these collaborations come to life?
Thank you very much for having me here. And it's always a pleasure to advance this discussion and communication around this. So one way is definitely collaboration on the basis of not reinventing the wheel. So as a starting point, the Kenya Green Building Society, being part of the World Green Building Council, we looked at the members at the World Green Building Council. And I had some very big company names just earlier from Bertrand before he left. And one of the questions we normally ask is, if these companies are signing to be net zero, for example, in Europe, why aren't they doing it in Africa? And we start targeting them, because if your core value is sustainability in one region, it should be the same across the world, because that's your core value.
If you'll forgive me for interrupting, what did the companies say when you asked that very good question?
A lot of times they say the business model is different. But in this case, we're talking beyond the business model. Sustainability has to be the core of the business. Another thing as well is we do note in collaboration, we had to go across national level, subnational level with government as well. And the biggest item there was education and awareness. So you're expecting policymakers to make and ratify regulations, yet they haven't spent the time to understand what the issues are and how they can be implemented by the people at the bottom of the pyramid. So we've actually, this is across Africa, we've realized education and awareness is the main key task. Over and above that, Kenya as well signed an agreement with IFC Edge, because it is quite right, we need to measure so that we can steer 65% of the developments that will come up in Kenya are the deficit affordable housing that we have at the moment. We're looking at over 2 million affordable homes to be built. So we have a fantastic opportunity that we're currently building our cities to actually capture this. And I like the discussion around materials as well. Because one of the main questions is, where do we get these materials? And Kenya Green Building Society has now embarked on very much looking at a materials directory. The same way we used to have yellow pages, the same way you have a contacts list on your phone, it's advancing that customer service to say it's at your fingertips. So we have to do the work to ensure people can actually implement. So collaboration is looking at the whole value chain and impacting from top of the pyramid with national government, and also looking at collaboration on the basis of what is finance doing? I like the mention that with the green buildings or the experts, we just talk to each other and we all agree, but we don't get out of that industry to actually make the major change. So our targets this year and next year is very much on finance and the underwriters to finance. Thank you.
And thank you so much for your perspective that, you know, global organizations who are talking the talk and walking the walk in some regions may then decide that it's not appropriate in other regions. And I think really important to make sure that those philosophies are embedded across global organizations. You mentioned the importance of local leadership from a regulatory point of view, as well as a sort of vision perspective. And we now are delighted that we have Mayor Suarez joining us. Just for those who are Zoom aficionados, you will know if you look at the bottom of your screen, the little bucket over on the right-hand side that looks like a globe, that's where you click for your instantaneous Spanish to English translation. Mayor Suarez, lovely to see you. Can you hear us okay?
Buen día, Claire. Muy buen día a todos. Muchas gracias por la invitación a participar de este espacio de diálogo que desde la ciudad de Mendoza, capital de la provincia de Mendoza, interpretamos como una oportunidad, ¿sí? Para poner en valor a la urbanización sostenible, tal cual lo ha destacado Naciones Unidas recientemente en su reporte de Ciudades 2020, y también para destacar el rol de los gobiernos locales, ¿sí? En la urbanización sostenible. América Latina no escapa a este fenómeno de un crecimiento de las ciudades sin una planificación, por eso considero que el rol fundamental del gobierno local es planificar cómo crece la ciudad. Hemos planteado aquí en Mendoza un modelo de ciudad, una ciudad sostenible, con un plan municipal de ordenamiento territorial que nos indica cómo debe crecer la ciudad en los próximos 30 años, y en ese crecimiento hemos tenido en cuenta este fenómeno global que es el cambio climático. Por eso, en el mes de enero de este año, declaramos la emergencia climática en la ciudad de Mendoza. Fuimos el primer gobierno local en avanzar en ese sentido, con un plan de ordenamiento territorial, teniendo en cuenta la emergencia climática, la herramienta que tienen los gobiernos locales para avanzar en una urbanización sostenible son sus códigos de construcción, que nos indican cómo y dónde debemos construir. Por eso en la ciudad de Mendoza contamos con un código de edificación que contempla estrategias sustentables tanto en lo constructivo como también en lo tecnológico y en la gestión de residuos. Eso lo complementamos también con programas de movilidad urbana sostenible, porque nosotros queremos que la ciudad de Mendoza sea una ciudad en la que el peatón y el ciclista tengan prioridad en la ocupación del espacio público. Y todo esto que les cuento está plasmado, cristalizado en un proyecto muy importante para la ciudad que se denomina Estación Mendoza Distrito Sustentable. Este es un vacío, un remanente urbano en el corazón de la ciudad de 24 hectáreas, en el que vamos a transformar una vieja estación de ferrocarril en un distrito sustentable, donde el 60% de ese espacio va a ser destinado a espacio verde. Y un dato que agrego muy importante, en la ciudad de Mendoza contamos con 40 metros cuadrados de espacio verde por habitante, tenemos más de 50.000 árboles, somos una ciudad bosque y estamos convencidos de que tenemos que trabajar junto al sector privado, como lo mencionaban quienes me precedían, ¿sí? En este proceso de transición hacia construcciones sustentables tenemos que acompañar al sector privado, trabajar junto a las universidades, a las organizaciones de la sociedad civil y también a la ciudadanía, generando incentivos y beneficios fiscales para avanzar en ese camino hacia una urbanización sostenible que desde la ciudad de Mendoza entendemos que no es una opción, es muy importante porque genera valor económico, inclusión social y también es fundamental para el cuidado del ambiente. Así que agradecemos este espacio para poder compartir nuestra visión del rol de los gobiernos locales que ante fenómenos globales como la pandemia que estamos atravesando cumplen un rol fundamental. Son los ejecutores en el territorio de todas estas políticas públicas y fundamentalmente en esta que nos convoca, que es cómo avanzamos en construcciones sostenibles, en un desarrollo urbano sostenible. Así que muchísimas gracias por el espacio. No sé si estoy bien de tiempo, Claire.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out that Mendoza looks like an amazing example of this very sustainable urban planning. I happened to see an article written by Public Square, which looks for the best practice in urbanism in the US and beyond. And the writer described marveling at these amazing water infrastructures, the acequias, I don't know how to say it, the conduits that irrigate what is a desert city and allow extraordinary green spaces to develop. And so it's a wonderful example, I think, of taking a historical feature in a city and making it part of a very sustainable development going forward. So thank you so much, Mayor Suarez, for sharing that story with us. It sounds like a wonderful place to visit when we can all start traveling again. If I may, I'd like to come to Katarina next because, oh, sorry, forgive me. No, that's, yes, Katarina next. You work for a bank. You also have experience in these IFC EDGE certificates that Elizabeth mentioned. Help us understand how you can drive the building industry and its value chain to get to this net zero and more sustainable place.
Yes, thank you so much for the invitation. I think we heard several times that financial role of financial sector actually is very important. We have so many ideas, so many different initiatives throughout the different sectors. And I think that the financial sector is the key player in all this picture because we all need resources in order to implement all these ideas. And I think that a lot of impulse can come from the financial sector. In ProCredit Bank and ProCredit Group on a global level, we are really focused on sustainability. Elizabeth mentioned some international companies that are doing something in one area and one region, but not across their operation countries. We are doing it in the same way in all countries of operation. And we are very proud to say that we are almost reaching 20% of green loan portfolio in our overall portfolio. And this is really something. To come a bit more into these green buildings, here in Ecuador, ProCredit Bank Ecuador is really focused on this segment. And we have, as the first point, we would like to point out collaboration across the sectors. So collaboration with IFC EDGE, as the institution, as the certification, but also with local regulation, policymakers. We are also collaborating with international funds. This is really important in terms of technical assistance. On one part, it is technical assistance that bank is using for our own purposes, but also we can provide it to our clients. So for example, if a client is investing into construction, we as the bank are using technical assistance funds from international funds in order to help them to improve their design in order to help them achieve the efficiency. And that is very important in this collaboration. Other point related with collaboration is also collaboration with associations of construction companies and also with another banks, because I think Magali mentioned this is not a competition. And I think this is a very important point. We are participating in the sustainability committee of the Association of the Banks, and we are exchanging the experiences with another banks in order to promote and impulse this from all the banks on the market. And I think this is really important in terms of collaboration. On the other side, this all is coming from the commitment of the bank. So as the bank, we have to have the management involved, and we all have to work together towards this zero carbon economy. I mean, this is a big goal, but we have to come step by step. As I think you mentioned, Claire, at the beginning, that this is something that we cannot change the world from once, but we can definitely put our parts and contribute as much as we can. So we are understanding the nature of these investments and pushing our clients towards certification through better conditions. So we as the bank, we are putting aside one part of our profits, let's say, and we are giving lower interest rates or longer maturity for the loans, which is definitely something that companies that are constructing are looking for. On the other side, we are also supporting construction companies by financing their clients. For example, if you're talking about green housing loans, we are also providing the same preferential conditions. Other point that is really important for financial sector, we are experts in finance, and that is a fact. However, we have to have common language with another players in this topic. And this is why it is really important to build up technical knowledge inside of the banks. For example, we have colleagues who are edge experts, and this is really important because in that way, we can assist our clients, we can give them advices, and we have this advisory role. And also, apart from just giving a loan or this financial part, we can also drive them towards this higher efficiency and better quality of construction. So that would be from my side. I hope, yeah.
No, great points, and so important. Again, this linkage of the design, the architecture, the cityscape, the local and national policies, and the financial community. And then I'm going to turn last to Seth, because of course, engineers, Seth, you are our man who is unleashing the global engineers to solve this problem. I'm married to an engineer, so I highly support this idea. But I guess this question of, people, I think, don't join up decarbonisation and resilience in the way that we have to. Help us understand how we bring those two important things together and what your community and your organisation can do.
Well, thanks so much, Claire, and to everybody else who also just spoke some fantastic thoughts and ideas and comments, and great to be with everyone today. Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's oftentimes a false narrative in terms of choice of decarbonization or adaptation, resilience. I've been fortunate to have been in this community of action on climate for well over a decade. And even in this kind of race to zero, I think it epitomizes, I think, the urgency with which we currently find ourselves in terms of the speed and transformation that needs to occur. But I think it's also doing it a slight injustice in the fact that we still, there was a time and a place when we had an orderly process to kind of put things in sequence. And I saw this comment about organized collaboration, really interesting concept. I would put forward a kind of a slightly argumentative point that I think the point of organized collaboration has passed. We have tipped so many planetary boundaries now already, whether it's the collapse of the ice sheets, the loss of biodiversity, the level of warming that we already have. We keep talking about 1.5 degree of warming. We've got to remember that's global surface mean temperature. There are already places specifically on the planet, particularly Africa, that are dealing with 1.5 degree level of warming now. So if we continue to just plow our thoughts and our efforts into decarbonization, which absolutely needs to happen, without understanding the impacts and the consequences that we're already facing, we're in a lot of trouble. I think the other thing that we need to focus on is the investment and when this is happening. So you're talking about how we're doing this and how we're managing this, Claire. We have to also think that if we rush blindly into a decarbonization scenario in the next decade, which is what the science tells us needs to happen, but we do that without future-proofing the investments or the infrastructure that needs to do that, our decarbonized infrastructure of this decade will be the 21st century stranded assets with which we are now looking at the fossil fuel industry. We cannot afford the time or the money to get this wrong. And I think where it gets really interesting on the engineering conversation, this is about whole systems thinking. This is looking at the big picture, but so does collaboration. I love this conversation about collaboration because I think everybody talks about it and everybody to some degree has practiced it, but I would argue that nobody is really doing the type of collaboration around the type of urgency that we need. If you think about the fourth industrial revolution, if you think about the rate of urbanization, if you think about the rate and the speed and the impact of climate change, the confluence of these, excuse me, is bringing about an unprecedented level of complexity that we've never seen before. And I firmly believe that 21st century leadership is partnership, because I'm not as convinced that we're all going to be winners in this. I think that's painting this conversation with too broad of a brushstroke. There are current losers, if you want to talk about it that way. There are massive numbers of people around this world that don't even have access to electricity. There are undocumented workers. There are informal settlements. How are we transitioning what has historically been losers into winners? And how are we taking winners, i.e. fossil fuel companies that have caused a lot of these problems? We cannot throw them out the window either. They have a lot of the expertise and engineers that we need in the next 10 years. We don't have enough time to retrain the entire world. So it's how we're transitioning both of these and holding both of these truths at the same time. There's a fabulous African proverb. I love using it. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. We have to go far and fast. How do you do that? And that's one thing I would just posit is we're thinking very deeply about this resilient shift. How do we rethink and remake our own organization to collaborate much more deeply, to realign what we're doing of understanding different organizations? But a couple of things I've heard that I really love in this conversation: enabling environments, value chain. So one of the things that we've just set up and helped found in the last year, we just actually celebrated the first annual anniversary last week, is the International Coalition for Sustainable Infrastructure. And what we've done is there's so many different communities of practice and actors that are needed. One of them at the center of this, I believe, is engineers. Engineers are one of the very few communities of practice that understand science, understand policy, but also know how to design and build these things. But they're risk averse. Engineers design things to a factor of safety, that engineering 101. You know, what's the failure in over-engineering for a brake pad, for a plane, for a car? But some of the problems I mentioned before, the level of uncertainty that we're facing is a massive issue, foundational issue for engineers. How do you engineer to a factor of safety with a level of unprecedented uncertainty that we have? So we've brought together this coalition of engineers around the world, but it's within the value chain of the engineering community. So we've got organizations like the American Society for Civil Engineers. We've got the Institute for Civil Engineers. These are associations of the individual engineers. We've also got NGOs. We've like the Global Covenant of Mayors with 10,000 cities. And we've also got organizations like the engineering companies themselves, all part of this coalition. So we've got an engineering perspective that is corporate, that is member driven, and that is NGO. And it's putting everybody together in that conversation to think, how do we as a profession need to change? How do we need to rethink what we're doing? How do we need to get assets and services in a different way? How do we need to, within the engineering community, stop competing with each other? Engineers and the companies, their main business is people and intellectual property. So you don't give that away. But that's exactly what we need. We need the intellectual property and experience that engineering companies have over centuries of designing and building things to unleash this transformation. So how do we get around the table, have an honest conversation about how we do this, and unleash that knowledge for impact? So those are just a couple of things that I would share to the conversation to date. But it's an absolutely critical question: is what does deep collaboration look like? How do we balance these things, and how do we move very quickly?
Thank you. I love the proverb, and I loved this sense of bringing the skills in a very risk-averse community to the table, and really sort of, you know, engineering both for today, as you say, for rapid decarbonisation, but also for future resilience. I think I'm conscious of time. This is a fascinating group. I could listen to everybody all afternoon, but I know we have to eventually move on. So I'm going to just ask our panel in our final sort of 7 or 8 minutes or so, just to give us a sort of rapid fire reaction, from what you've heard today. I guess, what is the one thing you would ask from your fellow panelists to move this forward? Elizabeth, I'm going to come to you first, because I actually would like you, if you could, to answer one of the questions that's been posted in the chat, which I think is a very interesting one, which is, how valuable is sort of purchasing power from those who are buying assets in the built environment, enforcing through some of these changes? What would be your reaction to that? And then if I can, I'm going to come to Katerina next, and then to Magali, just so you can think a bit about your answer to the overall question. Thanks. Elizabeth.
Thank you very much. The strength of purchase power has actually been showcased in Kenya at the moment. I did mention about affordable housing and the deficit of that. We talk about 2 million, so a lot of work for the engineers. So with the purchase power for affordable housing, if you look at each individual person who's meant to actually purchase that, there's no way that would work. It doesn't make commercial sense in the traditional way of looking at finance. So pulling the people together, the national government has actually set up something called Boma Yangu. It's actually online. It means my home. And we have over 300,000 registrations to date. And these are people who live all the way from informal settlements to low income. And by putting their data there, it shows that 300,000 people are ready to get into a rent to buy scheme, or even get mortgages, innovative finance around mortgages. And beyond that, the opportunity now is that if you want access to that database and you need to build, it must be green housing. So there's a decree this year that was actually set out by the State Department of Housing to say each and every affordable home that's being built has to have a minimum standard. And because our building code is still being updated, and by the time it comes out, it'll be outdated, especially talking about scientific facts about designing and building to the future. What's happened now is that we are looking at IFC Edge as a minimum standard, because it's a common language between the financiers, a lot of the world, and the engineers as well have data that they can use. And beyond IFC Edge as well, it's, if we're racing to zero, we're not racing to zero to get there and stop. We need to stay at zero beyond that. So we've also got collaboration with AXCOR, which is another free platform that's available for continued measurement of staying at zero and even performing better. So definitely purchase power is a core.
Is a good tool. Thank you so much. I can't remember which way round I said. I think I said Magali next and then Katerina. Magali, what's your top tip to take away from this conversation with these great panelists?
Hi. So before I go there, I need to answer to Elizabeth super quickly. Elizabeth, our targets are group targets for all regions, not just for Europe.
Hooray.
And we are piloting some greenhouses, and the first one that will come through will be at the end of the year in Kenya. So
Yay.
We are not forgetting you, I promise. So climate is a global thing. It's not a European or whatever thing. It's all over the world, CO2 cross borders. So I will be very fast. I think buildings and infrastructure really has to play a key role in the race to net zero. But again, I said I will be very fast. I think each of us have to contribute with our own target, with our own commitment. But if we don't work together to amplify, and we will never achieve what we need to achieve. So again, we need to win this race. We need to win it all together and not see it as a competition. And I will stop there.
Thank you. I love that. Katerina, your takeaway or your ask for this panel.
Yeah, I think, we heard so many interesting points, and I really loved what Magali said. So I was about to say something really similar, that this collaboration shouldn't be only across the sectors, but also inside of the sectors. I already mentioned our committee and sustainability committee in the banking sector. And I think this is something that should happen inside of different sectors, and then also sharing the knowledge across the sectors. And I think this is the key in order to improve, because who knows better about the sector, but the participants of the sector and members of this sector. So I think together we can make the change, we can make the improvements that are needed in order to drive this change towards decarbonization. So
thank you, Katerina. Lena, I didn't warn you, but if I could ask you to have a go at answering the question, and then I'm going to come to Mayor Suarez and then finish with Seth on his top tips. Lena, over to you.
Yes, I should also state that our climate target is, of course, relevant and active at all the markets that Skanska are at. I think something that we're really looking for is how the public clients can make the shift. And as for Skanska, 60% of our revenue comes from public clients. And when they put sustainability requirements, it is an enormous force. So I would going to take one example, and that's a European spallation source that we are building. It's 12 nations going together to build that. It's the most advanced research facility in the world. It's also a quite large construction project, and it has the highest sustainability standard. And that means that this enormous project site, we've been building it since 2014, and we have the target of 0 waste, and we are upholding that target. And that's an amazing way of working. I had to think everything through, what you bring into the site, how it's going to be used, and then how it's going to be taken care of and circulated, etc. That is a force. When you set out from the beginning in your procurement process as a client, stating what you want, and then you give the creativity to the ones that are the best to perform, and ask of them to do their very best to aim to that goal, and not just going for the lowest bid, but actually for the highest value.
Thank you very much for making that point. You're quite right. As somebody who used to work in the public sector, this sense of actually setting the bar high. And I always remember that the Neighbours programme in Australia is another great example of using the public sector to drive rapid progress. Mayor Suarez, from what you've heard, what would be your one ask for the panelists or for those that you are working with in order to accelerate this transition? I think you're still on mute, Mr. Mayor.
Sí, bien. Insisto en lo que les comentaba recién. Desde el gobierno local, definir dónde y cómo construimos en la ciudad de Mendoza, poniendo en valor zonas que hoy están deprimidas, ¿sí? Trabajando en esa compactación de la ciudad. Y en cómo construimos, tenemos que destacar el rol del Estado acompañando al sector privado. En este proceso de transición, lo que podemos hacer nosotros es incorporar beneficios fiscales para todas aquellas construcciones que incorporen estos criterios de sustentabilidad, como también para las nuevas construcciones. Pero algo que no mencioné, y es un fenómeno en todas las ciudades que han crecido de manera desordenada en América del Sur, es que existen muchas familias que hoy no tienen acceso a los servicios básicos y es necesario avanzar en trabajos de urbanización, ¿sí? Y esa urbanización de esos asentamientos para transformarlos en barrio también tienen que guiarse bajo criterios de sustentabilidad, porque si no, pareciera que esta agenda o estos debates se dan o están direccionados a ciertos sectores de la sociedad que tienen acceso al crédito o que están en una mejor posición económica. Nosotros debemos trabajar para el acceso universal a los servicios básicos, a la urbanización, pero también que alcance a todos los estratos sociales. Por eso, insisto, la sostenibilidad no es una opción y requiere del trabajo articulado entre el sector financiero, las empresas que construyen, la sociedad civil, la academia y los institutos que nos hacen sus aportes para definir con claridad cuáles son los mejores criterios para avanzar en el desarrollo urbanístico sostenible y fundamentalmente a la ciudadanía. En un contexto de una gran crisis económica en nuestro país, en Argentina, que se ha visto agravada por la pandemia, entonces es fundamental el trabajo articulado.
Thank you very much. And again, thanks for raising this important point that Elizabeth also made, that when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about global solutions. And it's a bit like the energy transition, where we often forget that 1 billion people don't have access to anything we would consider to be modern energy. So these conversations need to be very inclusive. We need to consider this transition for everyone. Seth, I'm going to come to you last. What would you like to ask from the panel, or make as the kind of key takeaway points for you?
Yeah, I think I've got 3 quick key takeaways, and I'm not sure if I would ask, because I think everybody on the panel is totally living and walking and breathing this, but maybe some three takeaway points. One, the first, I think, is a reminder that no one is smarter than everyone. My point being that in the collaborations that we're doing, we need to look to bring in non-traditional stakeholders to provide that diversity of viewpoints and to usher in the transformation we want to see. I think the second thing I would recommend to everybody is, let's take lessons from what COVID-19 has taught us. Instead of desperately wanting to get back to normal, we need to create a new normal, and we need to all create the new future that we want to see. And by doing that, we need to, my point really here is that we need to learn to lean into uncertainty and not be afraid of the risk, because if we do, we're going to be waiting for a long time. So we have to accept the level of uncertainty and lean into this. And then the last I would say is, for all of our endeavors that we're radically trying to move forward in terms of decarbonization in the next decade, let's make sure that we future-proof these efforts, so that the decarbonization efforts are future-proofed and resilient, i.e. they are usable for future generations. So that'd be my 3 quick takeaways, Claire.
Fantastic, thank you so much. Well, I don't know about the people who've joined us, but I feel like I've been in a sort of masterclass of radical collaboration and also innovation. It's been really fascinating to hear from so many different industry groups, regions, levels in the political system, and of course the enabling role of finance, and absolutely fascinating. And a couple of takeaways for me. One is that everyone on this panel appears to be really up for the challenge, which is incredibly exciting to see. There is a real sense that we know we need to do it. There's obviously a question about how much this is guided collaboration, how much we need to light a fire, but I don't get the sense that anyone on this panel is dragging their feet and thinking hard about how we do make these transformations. The second thing is, we have a pretty interesting ecosystem here, not all working in the same region at the same time, but this sense of all the parts of the system that you need to actually drive this transformation. I'd love to sort of put you all in a room and send you, or a capsule, and send you around the world to solve the problems in the different regions. And I think this sense of collaboration, working together to solve these problems is so important. If I can just say, my lovely backdrop with the sun rising somewhere over Alaska, WBCSD, this is one of the reasons that I love working for the organization. It's working with companies, leading corporates around the world in many different sectors, many different locations, but looking at ways to collaborate in a safe space to solve these challenges, and always looking for the next, to your point, Seth, what's the next frontier, what's the next boundary. And the point I've also taken away, it's not either radical decarbonization or sustainability, it's both. It's both and, we cannot be solving for one set of problems, we have to solve for both. But thank you all so much to the panelists. I've absolutely loved listening to you. It's been a masterclass. And thank you so much to those in the participant group who have also joined us. I hope you found it as interesting as I did. We're going to close the session now. I'm going to hand back to Martina, who is the MC for today, and who I think is then going to take us through some final remarks. But I hope you've enjoyed this built environment Race to Zero Day. I think it's been so important and so fascinating. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you so very much, Claire, and also a truly great panel, a wonderfully inspiring and dynamic session. And with that, we indeed get right into the closing. And it's been quite a dense program, so thanks for being with us and having stayed with us. And I'm delighted to be joined again by Gonzalo Munoz, Chile's high-level climate champion, And I'll get us started with a short summary of the day, which is quite a challenge because it's been incredibly rich. So I apologize upfront. I won't be able to do justice to everything that has been said, but just recall a few highlights here. And the first is the potential of the sector is huge. That came out very clearly, and that we need to wake up the sleeping giant, as we called it. It's time to connect agendas. The whole life cycle with operations and materials. There has been a vibrant call for material strategies and also consumption issues that we need to look at, both the new buildings and the retrofits. And the COVID recovery is providing us a real opportunity to home in a bit more on those retrofits with a renovation wave and making sure that the green strings attached. It's not only about mitigation, but it is about mitigation and adaptation and the perspective of creating much greater resilience in the sector. And in terms of the other agendas, it was pretty clear that we need to look at buildings not in isolation, but in their ecosystem, so the city, the neighborhoods, and really as a connecting point to the energy systems as well. So there's an integration factor. The other key takeaway is about this new type of spirit that is needed, the spirit of collaboration across the entire value chain between private and public. So we've been talking quite a bit about co-creation, not only the national, but at the national and the local level as well, and getting out of some finger pointing, but to putting our forces together. So a new type of quality of collaboration that spins from production to construction to demand and use. And we all have a role to play. That's very, very clear. And we need to be true partners in this. And what does it take for each part? What does one need from the other to create positive feedback loops, to create trust and confidence? We've talked quite a bit about that. Trust and confidence to go further and put all the energy and funds to decarbonizing the built environment. So to create the sort of virtuous cycle. And we touched upon a lot the policy, industry, and finance leadership, and it's happening already. We have a number of champions, and those champions need to help us pave the way for the rest of the sector, both champions in the private sector and in government. We've seen it. And we all have to take our responsibilities, work together, and win. And because the stakes are so high and tipping points are kicking in, if we're not striving to win in some way, we'll all be losing in the end. And I think that's a key one as well. While there's room to take sustainability, we pick up that term to the next level, we have a lot of the solutions already. It is about implementing them at a greater pace and scale, and we need more demonstration in all regional contexts. The roadmaps will help define targets and actions and align actors, facilitate this collaboration and co-creation. But the funding solutions are important as well. And we had a couple of really good examples, both from the Global Climate Fund, how well they can help with the more risky side of things and helping with the readiness programs to get the markets ready in a sense, but also the Asset Owner Alliance, for example, with their clear targets, really driving that change. We heard about the private sector to convey a real strong message of it is possible, and not only to convey the message, but to really show it and to do it in all markets. And obviously that's already happening. We need to harness the different motivations, and we had quite a bit of that as well. So it's not only about climate, it's about sustainable development, it's about the economies, it's about the jobs, it's about the informal sector, and it is about sustainable housing for all. And the pandemic just brought home this message of preparedness. And so there is this, well, as much as one can speak about the silver lining to the pandemic, but the sector is a key tool to this post-COVID-19 recovery with a new normal and its contributions to the economy and jobs. And while we need action on all three, the policy, finance, and industry, there has been a very big call for policies, policies, and policies. So that goes from the codes and performance standards to zoning, non-financial incentives to reduce urban sprawl, policy coherence, eliminating perverse incentives. And we heard about those incentives for virgin material extraction, for example, that we need to do away with. And also spurring policies that facilitate the use of underutilized space and spur circularity. So we heard quite a bit of new things. And I'm almost at the end, but at the same time, as we call for these policies, we do not need a permission, and we do not need to wait for the policies to take action, but the policies are needed to get us to scale. And here we heard as well the importance of the shift via their own public procurement from public buildings to affordable housing programs. So I'm very happy to report to the high-level champions that team building is not team building in terms of building teams, but the team buildings and construction is ready for the race. And there is a shared vision of zero carbon crystallizing out. And there's a sense of urgency and willingness to collaborate. So I hope I've done partially justice to this. And I hand over to Gonzalo for his closing remarks and taking us forward.
Thanks so much, Martina, and thanks to the team buildings and construction for not only being ready for the race to zero, being part of it, and also setting the pace in such a brilliant way. I was very especially enjoying that last panel with Claire and brilliant panelists and speakers from different parts of the world. I thought that they said very concrete messages that we have to take into consideration. For we know that as a sector, we urgently need to create the conditions for all new buildings to be net zero carbon in operation from 2030 and all existing buildings by 2050 at the latest everywhere. So taking the point that Elizabeth brought, this is something that is not only for, let's say, the developed countries and the developed regions of the world. This is for every region of the world where there are so many possibilities. And as we also need to take immediate action to reduce embodied carbon as part of minimizing whole life carbon across the built environment, we need the whole value chain to be involved, right? It's not only about the constructors. There's a possibility, there's a need, there's messages to be sent in the whole value chain. We have seen, of course, really bold commitments from representatives of that value chain. So we need those leading actors to move much quicker than these targets set out, to pave the way for the rest of the sector to speak to their providers, to speak to their clients, for all the whole value chain to mobilize, even considering so many other aspects, as it was mentioned, for example, energy being one of them. Decarbonizing the built environment will bring huge opportunities with so many economic and social benefits. The sector offers significant opportunities for job creation and reduction of poverty, but also we know that buildings are a key tool to the post-COVID-19 recovery. I'll not get tired of repeating this one time after the other. I said it in the opening of the day. Building retrofit should be the #1 measure in recovery plans. It's about jobs that require many times not that much training. It's a rapid creation of jobs. The permits are many times, or most of the times, of a very low complexity. That work reduces local contamination, reduces respiratory diseases, and reduces global greenhouse gas emissions. And mostly, when 80% of economically viable energy savings in buildings remains untapped, that is a massive no-brainer. It's a win-win-win-win. You can put all of the wins you want there. It's something that every leader in the world should be considering. We have, of course, many tools and solutions in place already. And as Seth mentioned, we have the engineers' capacity. I loved also that idea or that concept that you brought, Seth, on no one is smarter than all of us. The need of putting all of those efforts and capacities together is absolutely critical. And in that sense, from our role as high-level champions with my dear friend Nigel, we're extremely proud and thankful about the Marrakesh Partnership Climate Action Pathways that, together with the global and regional roadmaps that the Global Alliances for Buildings and Construction develop, those are tools that provide a framework for delivery of net zero. So we're not speaking about general ideas, we're speaking about concrete tools that we have in hands. And indeed, when it comes to technology, 70% of emission reductions could be achieved from the deployment of solutions that are available on the market today. It's nothing that need to be created in the future. Probably it will be improved in the future, but the concrete tools are already in our hands. We see, of course, a growing in industry commitments. Those front runners have started the race, and as I said before, we need others to follow. What we need now, of course, is also policy, finance, and collaboration. Definitely, we need urgent action on policies. The NDCs and the recovery plans will be really important. We need to improve building codes, proper planning, retrofit incentives. We know that, and we have to continue pushing for that. Then, of course, funding solutions for a net zero building environment. It's something critical as well, and we see that moving as well. And also, as we have said, and this session exemplified very well, we need radical collaboration, ambition, and the will and commitment from all actors along the value chain to deliver this vision for transformation. Finally, Martina and the team, I want to end with a call to action. We need everyone across the built environment value chain to join Race to Zero, but join today. This is the perfect moment to send the message to the world while we're entering to the 5th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. In the following 2 weeks, we will have the climate dialogues being led by the SB's chairs. This is a race in which we have to accelerate, and we need to dramatically step up that pace. Join those leaders that you have seen during these days, and especially today. Learn from each other. Let's race to zero together. Thank you very much, and congratulations for the day.
Thank you very much, Gonzalo. And I think, well, I can speak for a lot of people that have been on the panels today. They are ready to join. They're on board, and we will put our collective force, networks, and convincing power to bringing more on board. For sure, you have allies with us. So positive ending for sure. I would like to, well, thank you for the trust you've put in us to help us with this session. I would like to thank our fantastic speakers throughout the day, really inspiring, and also the team from the co-organizing organizations that has worked so hard behind the scenes to make this day happen. It's a clear testimony as well to collaboration. And I don't know whether you can, and if you're prepared, but if you could just switch on your cameras as well so that we can see you. You've worked in the background, but you deserve to be recognized because a lot of preparation went into this, and it was really, really great. So while that is coming on, I think really we're all ready to race. It's nice. Family photo. I think we're all ready to race now, and I would like to end this a few minutes early, actually, but I think we're good to do that. What does the race mean to you in one word? And if you could just write into the chat, and we see as we close, we see these responses coming in and hopefully being very inspiring and actually responding as well to Gonzalo's call for us to be in. So if it's a yes, it's a yes. If it's a key word on something that you take away, what it means to you, what is the most important thing, how you want to take things forward, just go for it, and we'll collect that. It will be a nice memory for us. And for sure, it will help us as well in reaching out to you again to further build this community. And with that, I would like to close this fantastic session. So thank you very much. So there's a few things coming on in the question and answer, and there's a few coming in on the chat. Thank you.